Uh, Hi viewers, welcome to the Vision Matter. Today our guest from Turkey, Professor Murat Kasimoglu. He is the professor of strategic management and working as a professor in Istanbul Commerce University Business School. Professor Murat Kasimoglu, welcome. Thanks for you joining this program.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Professor, this actually that this pandemic is coming to us suddenly. It COVID-19. Could
Yeah.
you briefly telling us about your experience, like as a academician, and also the many part of your role is also part of the management. Could you give
Yeah.
us a little bit experience about this pandemic?
Okay. So thank you very much, Dr. Taba. And so it is also my pleasure to talk with you and discuss what will happen. This disaster, I say, is very critical, and so influence the whole world, and so the many aspects of this crisis must be discussed with the academician, with the practitioner, with the scientists to find out a new way how we are going to do. So mainly, I say that the impact of this pandemic will focus on three critical areas. So what are they? The first, as a academicians, as a university professors, this development, and this crisis stops to teach at the school. So this is the big issue and big problem for education industry. And so what will happen for the next months or for the next year? It is getting from information about the research and opinions from the country leaders, business leaders, rectors, academicians. As far as I can say that, unfortunately, the normal structure will be get in the at least 6 months, 1 year. So we cannot continue our effort for the near future. So that will be a big problem for the educational system. And so as a instructor, so we have such a difficulties because of the COVID-19. This is the first aspect. So educational system is nearly crashed. And so some countries are ready because they use the social media infrastructure, digital infrastructure very well, because they have sources, internet infrastructure, and so that kind of technology is necessary to manage this process. But some countries, unfortunately, I say developing countries, and the less developed countries, for example. The developed countries will solve this problem maybe in next few months, because they have infrastructure, they have resources, and they can manage and handle the risk in this soon. Developing countries will have much more difficulties because the resources are a little bit problem to recover of the impact of the COVID-19, because COVID-19 now destroying all the system, economical system, social system, manufacturing system. So this kind of countries will have a much more risk, unfortunately, and the less developed countries will have, unfortunately, much more problem. And then, if the COVID-19 will be infect the people in that countries, I cannot imagine what will happen in the world, because these countries don't have the enough healthcare system. They don't have a hospital. They don't have a doctors. They don't have a medicine. and so and the regulation is not working, very well in that countries. And so, unfortunately, if that kind of countries will be affected from the COVID-19, and the death rates will be higher than today. I cannot imagine it. So, as a people, as a country leaders, they have to come together and create a global policy to the COVID-19. It is not related with the country only. It is a global issue. It is a global problem. And so, if the countries cannot come together and cannot cooperate together to solve this serious issues, serious problem, unfortunately, it will continue in the next 2 years, 3 years. I'm not sure. And so that is the one issue. The another one, of course, we are the business, academicians. So the business life. So business life is very, very important. So if you don't have a business, if you don't have economy, and so the life is totally stopped. And so the COVID-19 affected the business transformation. There was a big transformation about the business. Traditional and conventional business management, unfortunately, cannot get a response, cannot react to the COVID-19 problems. And so the many companies, unfortunately, closed the doors, and maybe they are not going to open it all over the world. And so what does it mean? It means the many people will lose their job. And so the unemployment rate will be, unfortunately, very higher in that case. And so, of course, that will mean social problem if the unemployment rate is rising certain level, 10%, 15%, 20%. So trigger the many problems as well. So that will be a big problem for also the leader of the countries will have to handle and manage this problem for their countries. And so what I want to say, of course, the social structure and the leading of the countries and the global model is also changing because of the COVID-19. Because in my courses, I always emphasize the globalization is the very, very important to make a business. But today, I say globalization also has some risk because the value chain and supply chain directly depends on for example, far Asian countries like China, for example. So the many countries has the supply chain with the Chinese countries. So if there is a problem at the China, so what will happen, for example? So the world must create it as well, the regional supply chain cluster in the new pattern, new area. And so that's another critical things that I can say that the COVID-19 will be influenced to rethink a strategy of the countries, a strategy of the regions to sustain, to survive, because it is so difficult, and we have to fight this kind of new enemy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's really interesting introduction. And what are you saying that globalization and also the social interaction and sort of thing will be, affected, and that's absolutely. But do you think this actually that now most of the university, as you're in the management side of the university, how you look at it, that what change could be in fact to the education, like teaching and learning? Just could you tell us a little bit about how Turkey is coping with teaching and learning about this pandemic? Like, it is going to be continue like that, or are you thinking this is actually something that people have to adapt in the future model of the teaching and learning?
Yeah, that's the one of the critical issue at the education industry. But I think already the digital learning, digital teaching is using the many universities, by the way, okay, and all
Okay.
over the world. Not only universities and high school level, elementary school level. So that kind of contents and the technology are used for improving the educational efficiency. Okay, and
Okay.
so, uh, but the university's roles will not be changed always,
Okay.
because
Okay.
universities or the other institutions, I mean high schools in a
Mhm.
way, and the other level of the schools will have to be a much more important in this case. Okay, and so the education quality
Mhm.
will be discussed, because this case also shows us that we have to talented people,
Mhm.
qualified scientists, qualified engineering, qualified researcher,
Mhm.
qualified business people, because the situation is very difficult. So fighting and surviving in this case requires high qualified human talent.
Fine,
And so
fine.
what we need in this case, so the universities and the educational institutions will be, of course, working with the new pattern, new structure, and they
Mhm.
use online teaching. They have to enrich their teaching materials with
Mhm.
with this technology. And so, for example, the many universities or many educational institutions don't have such a enriched content at the university infrastructure, and so this process will accelerate that institution to develop also their infrastructure, their contents with the online structure and interactive online models, and internet will be much more effective for teaching process, and also and the knowledge sharing will be a much more easier in that case. And so we will share for example, many experts' opinions all over the world with our student, and then
Mhm.
that will be a new model, of course. But I think that the educational institutions will have still very, very important for the countries. And so the universities and normal or class education or
Mhm.
new educational framework
Framework. Yeah.
will have to develop, of course, the teamwork, for example.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, I appreciate that you are talking about like in a kind of teaching and learning will not be too much changing, because it is most important for the country to develop scientists, engineer, all those are absolutely correct. But do you think, as you said, globalization, in terms of globalization in this pandemic, is any cost we didn't learn anything, or we didn't see anything that could be happen, or we need to be very careful about in future, that uh, what we are actually doing in the education. Like obviously online teaching is absolutely fine, but as we all are in suffering at the moment in under stress, do you
Yeah.
think that something we didn't see yet, or we need to be very much careful about in teaching and learning or business world?
Yeah, Dr. Daba. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very, very good question. Uh, I have to say, this is the new start for the human being.
Hmm.
Okay, and unfortunately, as a human being, we don't get lessons from the history.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
so that's the big problem. When we look at the history, there are the many pandemics and influence the human being life. The millions people lost their life in that kind of
Pandemic.
a pandemic. Yeah. So for this case, for example, I think there were some pandemics in African countries, like Ebola,
Ebola.
HIV, for
Hmm.
example.
Hmm.
And they are also pandemics. They are also
Absolutely.
virus. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And so they influence the all people life. the quality of the life.
Mm.
And so, unfortunately, the world leaders and world health organizations or other stakeholders, shareholders, cannot get enough lessons from this kind of special cases all over the world. Even it is Africa, Middle East, Asia, doesn't matter. It means, so that kind of risk will be influenced in soon the other continents, other countries, if it is in Africa or not. So, unfortunately, we don't see this kind of development. We don't want to see. And another, perspective, for example, the world system is changing. Digital technology has big impact and influence the all production system, all management system. And energy substitution is another very important development. And in the next 10 years, the oil and gas will be not big role in the energy industry, maybe. Okay? And so the technology is also changing very fast in that kind of areas as well. So what we have to see, as a global, from the global perspective, we have to see such a kind of a global factors that influence the local people, local companies, local business, local economy. And so we have to be ready for such a kind of hazards. Okay?
Good.
And if we have a right strategy, if we have enough infrastructure, if we have a defense structure to care our country, ourselves from such a kind of the risk, so we will not have such an impact, So the countries, companies, people must invest for such a kind of the new hazards that we will face to face.
Thank you, Rob. We are nearly finished. Just one thing I want to know from you, as you actually mentioned something like people need to think about the local, more local mentality about the country to give the down to their economy. So in this pandemic, who is losing and who is winning? Do you see any kind of a balance method in terms of your strategy, as you are an expert of a strategic planner? Do you see the in the global world anyone or any kind of country or something that winning and losing situation in this pandemic?
Yeah, thank you very much. Because the time is limited, so I want to say something on it. And I don't want to say that somebody will win in this, a difficult situation, because everybody is losing. People are lost their life, and the structure pattern paradigm is changing very radically, and so everybody has impact in this case. But some areas will be much more important in this development. The first one is the professionalism. All over the world, the professionalism has lost its impact. Okay, nobody's want to focus on the talented engineer, talented scientist, professional people. And so in this case, we have seen that the professionalism is very critical. So if we don't have a professional people, we cannot fight such a kind of risk. And so this is the one of the very important lessons that we have learned from this situation. And the another one, of course, this process requires two critical industry. The one is healthcare industry, will be much more important. The another one is the developing food industry, new food chain to make a country safe in this kind of risk. And so this is another development that's or another case that we have to say it will be very important for the countries and for the world shortly.
Thank you. So you mean actually finally you are saying like instead of technology, the country should think about the agriculture, farming, and do you think those things should be from your message that country should care about the future opportunity for their country?
Absolutely, Dr. Dabat. So the agriculture, pharmacy, healthcare service, hospital investments, developing new, for example, technology for caring the people from such a kind of risk. So the technological perspective, pharmacological, agricultural, so that areas will be great opportunities for making an investment in the new process.
New process.
And so, for example, I have been discussing with investors, and they are looking to make an invest to buy companies in that kind of areas. And so the global capital also, by the way, will be very motivated to make such a kind of investment all over the world, by the way. So the new opportunities, new developments also in that area will be very important.
Professor, thank you very much. And I do appreciate your time and really giving your inside thought about the pandemic and the future for the whole world. And I hope this message will listen many young people, and it will be actually improve a lot of things. So again, thanks you so much. And I hope we'll meet again in other programs. So keep oil and stay oil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Daba. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.